feels like it's good to do something else for a little bit.
Okay, well, I think most of everyone is here. I'm sharing the agenda, so I don't know, Brandy, if you have words before we hand it to Paige to give her legislative update. Otherwise, we can just let Paige go ahead.
Not a ton of words for everybody. We're just thankful that you guys are joining our call today, and I will go ahead and let Paige open it up with her updates real quickly.
All right, thank you. So for our legislative updates, we have our wireless telecommunications bills that we've been tracking all session. The first one's SB 2531. That's the single point of contact wireless services bill, and it was signed on April 30th by the governor. So that bill will become law on January 1st, well, it's law now, but it'll become effective on January 1st, 2026. And then the next bill is HB 251056, the local government permitting wireless telecommunications facilities bill. And that was sent to the governor on May 15th. So it was sent to him after session adjourned, which was May 7th. When that happens, the governor has 30 days to act on the bill. So sign it, veto it, or let it become law without signature. So we should know around June 15th-ish, or by June 15th-ish, what happens with 1056. And then the third bill is HB 251080. So that is the wireless telephone infrastructure deployment incentives bill. And that one was signed last week on Friday. And there was a ceremony up in Edwards, Colorado for that bill signing. So that one does become law, goes into effect on August 5th of this year. So yeah, those are the only bill updates that I have since the session did adjourn. We just want to thank everybody for your participation in this legislative session, and looking forward to working with you all next session. So in the interim, please feel free to reach out to myself if you have any legislative inquiries. And with that, happy to take any questions. All right, so I think you will be hearing beat updates next.
I apologize, I'm on my phone because my computer decided to reboot. It takes a while. But anyway, couple of beat updates. There's not a whole lot happening on the beat front from the federal side. We continue to make progress on our beat program. We're done with round one, we're done with round two. Just putting the final touches on the round two applications in round one. But in terms of having a process to move forward with our subrecipient selection process and getting finalized by the NTIA, in terms of submitting a final proposal or knowing what's going to be required of us in the final proposal process, we just don't know. And there's no timelines, there's nothing but the rumor mill, and there's a lot of chatter around different possibilities for what could happen to BEAD. And we're all in a holding pattern. There's over 40 states that are they're in the process or they're done with their subrecipient selection process as far as the BEAD program goes, and Colorado is no different than the others. We're just waiting. The only update we had was the 90-day extension process, and actually tomorrow would have been our deadline for having everything wrapped up for BEAD. And we would have met that deadline had we not been extended. So as far as the Colorado Broadband Office goes, we're really proud of the work our ISPs and all of our partners have done to get to this point with BEAD. We have a lot of amazing proposals and applications from a variety of ISPs across the state, serving just over 100,000 locations with fiber, fixed wireless, and satellite. And so we've always said, we've always maintained our tech neutral position in our broadband office and across our grant programs, hoping to connect those that are still waiting for high-speed internet. So we're not going to get to every single location of this program because, quite frankly, we ran out of money, but it just means we have more work to do in our state broadband program, which will launch next year. So, but we have made significant progress in closing the digital divide in Colorado, and leveraging our public-private partnerships, huge industry participation as well. So really, really excited about that. As soon as we know what's happening with BEAD, of course, our stakeholders will be the first to know. And if there's anybody on this call who knows more than we do, please share that. It would be very helpful. But I'm over here at Fiber Connect, and even my colleagues don't know much about what's happening. They're pretty tight-lipped at the NTIA right now, and part of me going to these things is to see if there's any information that I can muster up from people. And there's not a whole lot happening on the BEAD front. But so we're still waiting, and we'll hopefully hear some news here this summer as to what's happening. So and just, in terms of your patience with us, just appreciate your patience with us and your support of the broadband office, and anything that you can do to, express your support of the BEAD program to your elected officials and anybody who wants to know is always helpful, because speaking with many voices is easier than speaking with just the Colorado broadband offices. And just so you know, we're constantly advocating on Colorado's behalf, to the extent that we can, of course. We're advocating through different associations and partnering with different states to kind of show our bipartisan support of moving the program forward. So we're pretty much done with the BEAD program, and excited to make announcements officially, and doing ribbon cuttings and groundbreakings and all the things that we like to do with our partners on these big programs. So it was a very challenging program, one of the hardest programs I've ever seen in my career from a regulatory perspective, and just grant program perspective. But it'll make a huge impact once we get there. So hoping that the changes aren't so dramatic that we start over or have to do a lot of rework. So anyway, stay tuned on that. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'll stop there and see if anybody has anything for me. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah. When do you think you'll be in a position to respond to NIST with your final proposals? Assuming they were to say, "Hey, yeah, we're ready now," when would you be able to make that proposal to them?
So I have decided to put our final development of our final proposal just on hold for a bit, because we just don't know what the requirement's going to be. And I don't want to spend a lot of time and money coming up with a 200-page document, which might not be required, or might be significantly less. I don't know why there's an echo, but can you guys hear that echo? Is that me?
Yeah.
But so in terms of what it looks like, if we were to receive new guidance from the NTIA, in theory, with the team that we have, we can put together the final proposal within 2 weeks, assuming that the guidance isn't 150 pages long. I don't see that happening with this administration, but so if the goal is to reduce and make the program requirements easier, there are a lot of opportunities in that final proposal. And so the public comment process, I'm supportive of the public comment process, but to answer your question, Ralph, the broadband office can turn that around in 2 to 3 weeks.
Thanks. That was really all my question was.
Yeah.
No, I understand that whatever NTIA does could significantly change things or not. I just wanted to get a sense if all things were equal, what would it take for you to, and you answered my question. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, you're welcome. Anybody else have any questions about BEAD? it's kind of the same update every time, which is it's not ideal. I don't like to give the same update on no progress, but until we know more, it'll just be kind of status quo. And I don't know, hoping that we have an update in July that's subsident if the NTI has stuff. So we'll see what happens. But the update for Beat's pretty light this time around. So just wanted to at least touch on it. Go ahead, Eric.
I mean, it seems like there's been quite a bit of pressure coming from both members of Congress and senators on both sides of the aisle, from what I've been seeing, to go ahead and get these released for their states rather than just holding on to it forever or making substantive changes that will, kind of like you mentioned several meetings ago, put you and probably many other states behind as far as having to re-architect it all, which I don't know if there's any. You're saying nobody really knows, like even at Fiber Connect and when you're with some of the other state leaders there, but I just didn't know if there's like they're hearing any cracks in the ice at all about like, yeah, this is no indication that it's imminent or anything like that. It sounds like, huh?
No, I mean nothing. I nothing that I believe would be true. Just even today, you know, somebody said, oh, they're going to come out with guidance June 15th. I mean, okay, well, that seems really specific. Did they just, you know, because they said that last month, oh, it's going to be May 14th. Did they just change the months out and just call it June? You know, there's no compass on this. And I've heard things of, oh, they're changing the criteria. You know, they're going to change the criteria. I heard that the other week, and I've heard they're going to make you do another round. I've heard that they're stripping all the requirements out, and the only thing that's going to matter is the bead overlay. That's the only criteria. So they're going to take I've heard price caps. I've heard all kinds of things. And you know, I've heard that they're not going to require a final proposal, and then I've heard that they're going to require a final proposal, and I've heard that they're going to change everything that isn't law, and then or they're going to keep the law and strip all the program stuff out of the NOFOs, you know. And so, but then I also heard today that they're actually putting stuff in the guidance that is not law, that or actually contradicts the law, that's actually illegal. And so it's just, it runs the gamut. And it's like, it's really, I mean, from a good government person perspective, I've just never seen anything so I don't know, just confusing, you know. And you know, one of the things that they could just do is they could just let BEAD go forward and claim the win, you know, because this would be a big win for the people that are in office right now if they could just let it go through. But and I've heard it's going to turn into a Leo program, and I've heard they're going to remove fiber. Like, I mean, you know, I don't know. I've heard a lot of stuff. So I think all we can do at this point is not spend a lot of time and energy on the rumor mill and just wait for the guidance and keep a level head about it, and expect anything. So it's a weird place to be in from a grant making perspective, but we're not the only program that is confusing right now, and broadband is one of them. So the good news is that nobody's talking about getting rid of BEAD. So that to me, that's a good that's good, because that would be a really awful rumor. So there's a lot of support for it still. So I think that's good news in all the chaos that we're kind of experiencing right now. Go ahead, Sandra. Oh, Eric, are you done? Okay.
I was just going to say, just, you know, listening to you talk about it, this is the most chaotic situation ever. I mean, it was supposed to be the speed for BEAD, and it's what they're doing or what's happening is totally antithetical to that, because nothing is moving, and it was supposed to be deployed so quickly, and everybody's supposed to have internet. We may not have internet now. I mean, for the Coloradans, like in the governor's resolution, until 2030. I mean, things are just not moving. That is just crazy to me, that it was supposed to be so important to go ahead and get this deployed, and nothing has been done. Not one grant has been, nobody's been funded. It's crazy. I'd love to know what is going on as soon as you hear something, because this is just a mess. And I just wanted to have that comment.
Yeah, Sandra, I think yeah, it's a lot to navigate for sure. And you know, I think, everybody wants this to happen like yesterday. And I don't yeah. I mean, it's hard because there's no visibility or transparency into what the holdup is either. So, I think and the longer, we wait, the more expensive things are for people. And so that, our purchasing power diminishes significantly. So, we might be able to cover 100,000 locations a day, but if we're sitting here 6 months from now, it might be 90,000 locations because of all of the delays. And I know our ISPs will be spending a lot of money as well. The state will be spending a lot of money. I mean, our costs will we're gonna have to find savings as well. So, but for ISPs that are already kind of looking at razor thin margins, there's money in broadband, but there's not like that much money in broadband to redo these things that, and the market uncertainty as well. It's you're hoping that perfect storm doesn't happen where you kind of things become really expensive and you lose a lot of money too. So, and rural networks they're already really, really expensive. That's why BEAD came to fruition. So to subsidize these networks. And so, I'm just, I'm hoping that they make up their mind pretty quickly here so that we can get to speed to BEAD. And going back to the NIST conversation, what I know about NIST is they're really backlogged, and so what I'm hearing in other programs is not broadband per se, but they're pretty much there's a huge bottleneck within NIST. So even if you submit something, your documents, it's taking twice as long. I think the other piece of it as well is because of the staffing shortages from DOGE. They lost staff to review all of the documents that states are submitting, local governments are submitting to get things approved so you can get your money. And so, we might be able to turn around a final proposal in record time, but it might sit there for quite a long time before it ever gets approved. So, because there's nobody there to look at it. So that's also something that's out there as well. So we're just the what do they call it? The bureaucratic machine is come to a grinding halt in some ways. So hopefully we can break free and see some movement. But yeah, I agree, Sandra. It's a tough thing to navigate right now. Sorry, I'm a little bit of a downer today. Thought I'd have more information for you guys. Anybody else have anything on BEAD? Okay, so if NTIA does come down and say we have to do a third and final round, I just want you guys to know we are prepared to do that. And so it'll look like a couple of things. It'll look like depending on what it looks like, we're gonna probably try to do a last ditch fiber push for that as well. So we don't want to come up with several applications for you, but like we'll try to leverage braiding our other funding, because we do have some money left over from CPF and some other grant applications. So we're still trying to figure that out, which kind of is a good segue into CPF. We're not going to wait too long for BEAD though. If they're still tooling around and we're sitting here 6 months from now waiting for this third round or whatever, we're going to go ahead and move forward with our other initiatives. But so CPF, we just kind of give you guys an update. Our first approach with CPF was to try to do it the easy way, with the understanding that we don't have a consultant right now for CPF. We were using Tilson before. They finished out their work for us, but tapping the existing awardees to see if there was any low-hanging fruit that we could pick up at a really just low effort perspective. And everybody seems to be fine with their existing networks. And so we didn't receive any applications for existing networks, awarded networks for CPF. So we are going to open it up. We'll open it up. We haven't figured out what the grant guidelines are going to be yet, but we're going to go back out. The reason why we chose low effort is because it's only $690,000, not even $1 million. And the idea of getting, I don't know, 150 applications for $690,000 is just like, it's a lot. And you're looking like you're reviewing a lot of applications and saying no to 98% of them. And so we tried to take that effort just to see if we could just use some funding to top off some existing networks. So unfortunately that wasn't the case. So we're gonna open it up, see what we get, and we'll figure out. I can't really answer any questions on what the guidelines are gonna be. We're gonna put our heads together to figure out what's the best way to spend those dollars without kind of soliciting a massive bid process for really just a small amount of money. But we do want to try to spend that money before the deadline's over. We don't want the money to go back to the feds. So, but anyway, we were not successful, so we will go out again. So stay tuned for that. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I realize you can't say what the guidelines would be for whatever grant this is going to turn into, since you don't know yet. But is there limitations on what you can use it for? I suppose at least it has to be governed by the American Rescue Plan guidelines from which the funding was derived, I'm guessing, for CPF, as far as like when it has to be used by, maybe some other qualifications on that. I think there was a kind of a fiber preference listed in the IRS or the Treasury guidelines for that too. Is that true as far as what it could be for, or are there other limitations that you know of?
So these are ARPA dollars, and the CPF program plan that we chose was broadband deployment. Our broadband plan was approved for deployment, last mile, and fiber preferred, right? Fiber preference. And we amended our plan to do multiple rounds if need be for any remaining dollars that come back to us. So line extensions, last mile, those are the eligible uses under our current program plan. But it's the same requirements of the original program that we launched a couple years ago. So we just amended our plan to add multiple rounds in a line extension to allow for line extensions to new or existing networks or to new networks. So that's what we did to give ourselves more flexibility. But same regulations, same program identical.
Do you think it will still require a last mile component of it, as opposed to say potentially middle mile that isn't directly servicing a specific last mile location?
So it's similar. So it can fund middle mile, but middle mile has to have last mile component.
Okay. So you have to have
it can't just be it can't be standalone middle mile that connects no one. It has to be last mile.
At least an anchor institution, last mile or something that's, feeding a last mile fiber build or something.
Yeah, it has to be last mile. Yep, it has to have last mile connectivity. So it can't be like, a dark fiber project that you're going to light up later to a network that's not attached to your application. It's similar to BEAD and the original plan. It can be middle mile, but here's how I look at it. You fund last mile, and then if last mile, it's more of like last mile first. If middle mile happens to be part of your application, that's great. It's not. It's not preferred to be the other way around, but it can be. But we're looking for locations. We predicted or projected connecting about 60 locations with the remaining dollars that we had.
Right.
And that's based on projected costs that we have that we're seeing across our program. So, we want to see we would love to see 60 locations. So if you have a middle mile project that connects 60 locations, that would be fantastic. I'm not saying I'm talking about an applicant.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I might, still put my plug in. I'm usually the middle mile advocate, so because I feel like it was put behind the last mile by kind of the cart before the horse analogy, fairly much from the get go with all of this funding that's been coming down from the feds. Which you're right, middle mile needs to feed the last mile, and you need middle mile to feed the last mile. So there's these catch-22 aspects to it that I think there's large amounts of Colorado that are still going to remain underserved, even after these, even assuming BEAD goes fully forward, partly because of that lack of middle mile access, which we may or may not get to that. I know it's not on the agenda, but I know you got a request for quote out following up from your RFI on somewhat to address that from the CBO level. But if there's any way that it can be focused, I think what I've seen from DOLA is that you get a bigger bang for buck for those smaller amounts when it's got a middle mile focus than what you would, like you say, you're only going to get 60 addresses, which, it's important to those individuals if they get it, but that's not overall moving the needle that much for an entire region or even for the state on 60 addresses. But especially if you require like a 50% match or even a 25% match, you replicate those dollars for even if there's a last mile component to it. It may not be 60 addresses, but it might be reaching at least some last miles that were previously unserved by funding a new middle mile build. Well, then that's permanent infrastructure. And it's even better if that is done by consortiums of, government or quasi-government, because then it's not proprietarily owned, which there's a couple of the CPF builds that got built kind of on the overlay of what the Southwest Corners NTA middle mile application was. And at least it's getting built. That's better than nothing, but it is being built by a proprietary, private entity. They're actually, even though they didn't have to, I don't think of CPF, they are allocating some of those strands for future use for the governments, and it's not even being constructed commercial only use. Well, the thing is, though, they're like the only provider that is in that area building out fiber to the home, so it's kind of safe for them. It's good, there's not going to be anyone else to sell to for the most part for those fiber that's getting allocated to the local government. But what would be better is, like, say that company, even if they're great, in 5, 10, 15 years starts to be not so great. Well, it's a little bit like, at least there's some heads there to be able to provide something to those areas without a rebuild. But in other areas, all we have is one private provider providing an ILEC that's providing the fiber into certain locations. So, even if you take that $600,000 and you multiply it by 2, a $1.2 million build could potentially get into an area that then opens up that fiber, but it also could give some hedge against a single provider having a stranglehold on that area as far as their communications for decades to come. So you just get a lot. I've just seen it around the state with DOLA that there's been a lot of those middle mile efforts that I mean, for even what seems a small amount of money, you get a lot of bang for your buck. So I'm just putting my plug into, if there's a way to kind of, dovetail it into that constraints by having a last mile component, even if it's small. I just think, for that small amount, you're going to get more bang for your buck by building fiber than into area than it is to just add a few more households.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you, Eric, but CPF is not a middle mile program. So
It says middle mile in it if there's a last mile component. So I'm just saying there's
yeah,
ways to massage it.
there's ways to massage it to a certain degree, but the feds have told us multiple times that there needs to be a significant last mile piece to it. And so in our state broadband program next year, yeah, we're gonna do a lot of the things that you say we're gonna, like you mentioned, like leveraging middle mile builds to really open up a lot of access in Colorado, those areas that are, they have one provider or no providers, or it's more cost effective to build middle mile access out, right? But we can't, there's just not a lot we can do with the federal dollars. And when we went rounds with the treasury a couple years ago on middle mile, we asked the same question probably 5 or 6 different times, the same comments you've made, and every single time was, it's last mile. Like, yes, you can do middle mile, but we want to see last mile. We want to see last mile. And I get it. Like, it's totally chicken and the egg. And I totally agree. I think, the feds, definitely underfunded middle mile. Like, they really underfunded middle mile. And
By an order of magnitude.
yeah. And so, when I'm thinking about last mile, I'm like, well, how do you get all of this last mile when there's no middle mile? So I agree with you. I just don't think this is the program to do it. And it's just not. And you can put middle mile in there. We have in CPF, like, we do have some middle mile applications but there's significant last mile pieces to it. Because we also have to report on it. We have to report on the last mile locations are in our data. So yeah, I hear what you're saying and I agree. It's just CPF's not the program to be funding shoehorning middle mile, because the treasury sees right through it. They just do. And so if it's a last mile application, send it our way. If it has some middle mile, great. But if it's a middle mile application with one location attached to it, it's probably not going to pass. So I'm just being really honest with you on that one, because this isn't the program for it. But we do have a program and it's coming. And we allocated 60% of our high cost program to it. So there's a program for that. It's just this funding isn't that. So. And also, if you're on this committee, you promised us that you wouldn't be an applicant in our program. Just letting you know, because I know that you said you might put in an application. Yeah.
Talking to me?
Yeah.
I didn't think I was going to put in an application. You were talking about the one for the leftover CPF?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not doing anything.
Okay, good.
I'm just advocating for things.
Okay, that's all right. You can advocate. That's why you're here. So that's why you're on the council group. Anybody have anything else? If you have any ideas and you want to share them with us about, how we might set up a different, how we might go about a round 2 for CPF for the $690,000 that we have, you can certainly share that with us before we open it up, or as we're thinking about it. We'd be happy to hear your ideas. So anybody have any ideas?
What's your schedule as far as coming up with your ideas?
Maybe if you want, maybe by the next consult call in July, would love to do something, have an idea of what we're doing in July and rolling it out. Does that give you enough time?
Oh yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Maybe you can share them with me, share them with us at that meeting, or share them beforehand. But that.
Mhm.
Okay. All right, open discussion. All right, well, hearing none. So this was a short call. Hopefully I'll have some more news for you on BEAD next time. But I just appreciate you guys taking the time this afternoon to talk with us with CBO. And yeah, go ahead, Eric.
I did have one that was
Yeah.
kind of ties into the last discussion we just had, but I wanted to give other people a chance to jump in if they did have anything. So I asked the question last time and you were gone. But then I see Brian's gone now, so he can't. Lauren and Paige can vouch for the fact that I asked the question. But it had to do with the connection to the state park down near Trinidad.
Mhm.
And I was still kind of unclear how that was really figuring into any middle mile plan, in the sense that it sounded like it was kind of disconnecting a long connection off of fiber from a central location in the state to a state offices at a remote state park. So
Mhm.
kind of an anchor institution connection. So how it was, figuring into the overall middle mile landscape as a project, as opposed to just a long connection to a anchor institution. But if there's any, like, is there any communities along the path that are also going to be improved by having new fiber accessibility or points of access to a DWDM connection or something like that that we're unaware of, or is that getting fleshed out as it gets built?
It's getting fleshed out as we plan for it. And it's DNR's project, and it's part of their broadband strategies, and we're pretty much dialed into what they want to do for the parks. I talked to them. I talked to him, Dion. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, because we check in regularly on their broadband plans. And Fisher's Peak, that's been on the radar for since I've been in this role, and they're still very much they still want to do it, and it would improve access along the route to the park, and the plan would be to have it be open access. The issue with it is it's not like just the whole idea is to leverage it and have it be open access. It's probably going to take the form of a public-private partnership, so it's not going to be necessarily like DNR owning and operating it. So they haven't selected a vendor or anything. They're still very much in the design phase. In terms of a larger strategy for state middle mile, we have not started that process yet. So it's not tied to a greater strategy, to answer your question there, Eric. That'll come later when we get through our vendor selection for our middle mile strategy. Our biggest issue is there's no money to build it right now. And so they're on pause for lack of funds. And so they have a little bit of money, but they don't have enough money. And so we're hopefully we can do something next year. But there's no money to build any middle mile in the state. And I think I've said this to this group before, is we have a lot of middle mile desires and plans, and they're great, but the state does not have money to build any of it. And so we're going to have to be really creative in our existing programs to make middle mile happen. And so, it's good to be an advocate, and we'll continue to advocate, and the broadband office will continue to advocate for it as well. So DNR is at the beginning stages of a really great plan and idea, and we're going to help them with it eventually, but it's very much in the planning stages. And they have a couple of other state parks that they're planning for, and just to refresh everybody's just memories, in the governor's executive order, he called out connecting state parks in his executive order, and so it's very much on the governor's high priority list, if you will, to connect state parks. So we developed the whole Colorado broadband, part of the Colorado broadband roadmap calls out specifically what DNR wants to do with their part. So there's a strategy for DNR, but does it connect to the entire middle mile landscape of Colorado? Not yet, because we haven't developed that, which is coming. So once we start that initiative, we'll roll those strategies into it. So that's where we are with that project. And sorry I wasn't available to answer that question. Brian did tell me you asked that question, so I was able to kind of formulate some thoughts around it. So
So you mentioned having money next year, and I think you mentioned earlier the state and local dollars program. Is that my understanding that that's not going to be opened up for a window until 2026? So it won't be a window later this fall or anything like that?
no, it'll be 2026 for sure. And I don't have an ETA on it. There's a couple of things I'm working on internally to make it happen. But it'll be next year. And so the reason why we need to do it next year is we have to get our grant application ready for it. Our grant guidelines are done. But BEAD is such a behemoth of a program that layering another grant application on top of our ISPs, on top of BEAD is a little too much. And actually, even with CPF, some of the folks that did not apply for this kind of micro grant that we rolled out, they were too busy with BEAD. So we need to be strategic in our grant making. And then the other piece of it as well is, we want to make sure that the dust settles on BEAD, so we have a pretty good accounting of our BSLs and what's served and what's not served still after BEAD. And so when the dust settles on all the federal programs, hopefully we'll have a good map in 2026 of what's still available. Now I know that doesn't really it doesn't really speak to middle mile, but last mile we will have that. And then the other piece of it as well is I want to try to get through as much middle mile strategy as possible. So that when we do our grant making next year, that we have a good idea of kind of what our top 10 priorities are. Not saying that the other priorities are not priorities, but having some of that strategy at least somewhat fleshed out too would be helpful. So and then we'll have
the high cost support mechanism that is largely funding that, is that being collected and kind of held in escrow for this year it will be available for next year's grant once that's able to be evaluated, or what's happening with that this year since there's no funding for any of the Colorado broadband fund or any of the stuff that it used to be funding?
That money is still being collected and it's being held by the PUC. And that funding will be made available to us when we start our grant making. We'll just go request it from the PUC.
Okay, so there'll be some funding.
I'm oversimplifying the process. I won't get into too many details about how that works, but it'll be available when we do our grant making. So we'll have the total available to us, and we'll do our grant making based on that total. I haven't decided if it's going to be one big grant application or two. Sometimes it's easier to do two. We might do a tier 1 and then tier 2 because remember we set it up into 2 tiers, middle mile and everything else. It might be easier to do it that way for applicants and also the staff. But we'll have to decide what we do there. But it'll be available next year. It's not like if we don't use it, we lose it. There's also a couple of legislative things happening next year that are they could have some impact on it. Not in the negative and the positive, of course, but PUC is going through a sunset review and of all their fees, so we'll be looking at that. And then so there's just a few things hanging out there. But next year is going to be the year we open that up.
That's great. Thanks for that information. I was going to give you some positive feedback too. Some from you. You probably don't get enough of that sometimes. That CPF is making everybody, at least in my local areas, very excited because in many cases these counties have not had a fiber to the home build until now. So people are seeing the conduit going in. They're getting door hangers on their doors. The ISPs are reaching out, multiple ISPs to the consumers, and there's a lot of buzz about the fiber that's coming. Some of it as soon as the end of the summer and or late spring next year, probably at the latest for most of them. So they're all very excited to hear that. Of course, there's the people that are wondering like, well, how come not us? How come they chose this place and not that place? And it's just like usually comes down to me. Sometimes I have to say they chose what they could. There was things that were out of all of our control that designated where those places could be. But we're hoping that it will start a lot of momentum. That now that there are operations in fiber to the home here, that even the adjacent areas that weren't grant eligible will be the next step. They're just like you say, too focused on building to their grant obligations first, and then they'll start to think about what they can pencil in as far as expansion off of that that might come next, and that'll kind of change your landscape too, as far as like what's built to for fiber and what has served and not served and future mapping.
That's wonderful. That's really great to hear, Eric, and thank you for that. And we just kind of we just kind of put our heads down and try to do all the good work we can to get the dollars out to those most in need. And it's good to hear a compliment. So really appreciate that, and really glad to see CPF dollars working in community as they were supposed to. And again, I can't say enough about like positive stuff about CPF and the program itself. It was just so easy and simple, and just it was really fun to work on, with especially in that region, with you all, and just strategies, and one of the things that we talked a lot about at the broadband office with CPF is how do we make decisions that seed future investment. Because CPF isn't just when the state invests in infrastructure, it's not just like, hey, here's this one time piece. Like, how do we put it in an area where we can leverage, like people can leverage it for other investments, maybe private sector investments. So, to your point, focus on your grant and then start building out your network, and you can really start to see these projects really take shape and really grow in the region. So really happy that people are getting fiber. It's just such a hard place to reach down there, and it's just through a lot of effort. Matter of fact, we had the easy job. You guys down there, boots on the ground, beating the drum for decades. You guys did all the work, really, in my opinion. So compliments and kudos to you all down there, because if it weren't for you, we wouldn't have heard your cries and pleas. So thanks for the invites and working hand in hand on that. That wasn't easy, and you guys put in a lot of hours on that, and so it's really paid off. So now we just got to get the middle mile piece figured out with no money. So, but we can do it again. We can do it again. So thank you for that. We really appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right. Anything else for the order? All right. Well, the group is thinning, so I think that means that we might be done for the day. Again, if you guys can float me your ideas by next meeting or at the meeting for anything you think about CPF. Again, it's only $690,000. It would be nice not to have 200 applications roll in for such a tiny amount. It is the last mile program still. Sorry, Eric. And we'll definitely and hopefully I'll have some news for Bede. But anyway, thanks for spending the afternoon with us. And yeah, so it needs to be quick. So if it was just one project that was $690,000, that would be awesome. But anyway, you guys, thanks so much, and take care, and we'll see you next time. All right. Bye, guys.